Hey, you there? Do you still care? I'm kind of glad that I wasn't around to see this race in its entirety because I would have been both sad and bored. I will get to that incident in a moment, by the way, but there are other people to talk about. Max Verstappen, what more do I really need to say? The guy's completely unstoppable. He started 6th for the race after changing a gearbox, and he still won the race by a country mile, and it was absolutely crazy. Yeah, he did have a little bit of argy-bargy with his team engineer, but that doesn't really matter. At this point, they're just an old married couple. They bicker, but they still win. I mean, you always hear about Max just complaining about either the tyres or the wind or something to do with the steering, but it's just what Lewis was talking about with, oh, the tyres are gone, man. It's just what Max says instead. Ferrari? I mean, I really didn't expect Ferrari to rip this hard during the race, but you know what? They actually kind of did. Charles Leclerc did a really good job here. He himself a winner, but I'm going to lump Ferrari in here as well because both cars did very well. But it just made me realize something. Ferrari are really good during sprint weekends for some reason. There's just something about them that really seems to connect with Charles, and he's able to really excel during these events. And let's hope this performance actually translates well to the race proper. But that being said, Charles does do very well here because this is where he got his first race win in F1, so we actually should have seen this coming, that he would do pretty well here. It's just a shame that Carlos didn't really maximize it during the race, but again, I'll get to that in a moment. Speaking of which, my boy, Oscar Piastri, eh? I think that this entire weekend put Oscar Piastri on the map, and I definitely saw an uptick in views on my Oscar Piastri video. There was a massive surge after the sprint. He was brilliant up until the race start. In the sprint, he was completely unflappable. He actually led for a few laps, and they made a really good strategy call. Admittedly, they were very lucky that they didn't get bogged down with having to wait for cars to pass them in the pits, but Oscar was able to do good, and he held off Max until the safety car. If that had not have happened, he would have held on pretty much until the end. Maybe Max would have bided his time and then took him in the last couple of laps, but the fact that he was even able to do so in his rookie year, I don't think Lando was able to do that, so it's going to be yet another thing that Lando's going to be thinking of, oh dear. But to be fair, McLaren have a better car now than what they did when Lando was starting off in 2019. That does have to be addressed. So Oscar was able to get something for the team on Saturday. And McLaren have two drivers that can actually score points quite decently. And it's going to be very obvious that Oscar's going to end up scoring more than Daniel Ricciardo did in 2022. So already, he has justified his place at the team. He's also established himself as a very calm individual. He's not easily flapped. He's actually sort of a very chatty Kimi Räikkönen almost. Like, he's very calm, he's very monotone, but he is willing to have a conversation with you. He is very deadpan, and I actually find it really charming. As for the clash with Sainz, it was definitely a racing incident. It was a 50-50 situation. Both of them were at fault for certain things. Oscar, he is very eager. We're starting to see a pattern here that he very much likes to have a dive into turn 1 at the beginning of races, and 2 out of the 3 times it's worked, but this time it didn't. La Source, it's a very tight corner, and at that situation, he really should have backed off hard. Yes, he would have lost a few more positions, but he would have still been in the race. But at that time, it was either you're going to connect with Sainz or you're going to connect with the wall. So there wasn't really anywhere to go, honestly. At the same time, we had Carlos duking it out with Hamilton. He locked up his tyres. He didn't really have anywhere to go. He wasn't really paying attention to where Oscar was. So it was, again, just a racing incident. Oscar was too feisty and Carlos wasn't looking fully. Now, Yuki. Excellent stuff here. After a very wobbly Hungarian Grand Prix where we were thinking that, oh great, Daniel's just going to wipe the floor with him now, we're actually starting to see Yuki punch above his weight. He is not going to go down without a fight. He got them yet another point, AlphaTauri, and it would have been another 2 points, doubling their points tally, but he was pipped at the last minute, so it was very unfortunate. It's not a lot of points, but it's something. Does Daniel have any points at the moment? Yes, I know you're going to be saying that he nearly scored one in the sprint, but he didn't. He got 9th, so there you go. Yuki has the points and Daniel doesn't. He needs to just hold his own, learn from Daniel, but not let Daniel unsettle him. And we all know that Yuki can be unsettled quite easily. But this is not doing so. This is exactly what Yuki needed to do going into the summer break. Show that he can still score points, he was faster than Daniel on the race day, and he's got a lot of positivity from all of this. Now, Checo. In the midst of a very troubling situation off track where apparently there's a performance clause in his contract where if he is more than 125 points behind Max Verstappen in the championship, and lo and behold, he is 125 points behind Max Verstappen right now, he will actually start to get a pay cut and other benefits being taken away from him for the fact that he is technically not doing good enough. Max is absolutely a titan and no one can keep up with him. This was just unfair. Checo did do the best he could possibly do on the day. He got a Red Bull 1-2 in the race, and it would have been probably a Red Bull 1-3 in the sprint without that incident with Lewis, and that was not Checo's fault at all. In fact, he did very well to not bin it coming out of that corner and hold his own, showing that he did have a lot of grip. But I just feel really bad for Checo at the moment. He's now finally starting to get his groove again. He got up to second place and he held it, but he was still over 20 seconds behind his teammate in the same car. But what more do you need Checo to do? Just get second places. That's all he has to do. Aston Martin, yeah, I'm going to put them here. Nobody really expected much from them because of the fact they are on a downtrend at the moment, but that's mainly down for them running out of steam. That's not them just sucking suddenly. I've said this many times, Aston Martin have punched above their weight harder than they have done in years, and now they're just not able to keep up at the moment. But I think they will keep up next year. Despite Alonso's mistake in the sprint, they did a lot better than anybody expected, and they did get a double points finish. That is not something that anyone really saw coming, because Ferrari were really on it, McLaren would have been decently expecting, and of course Williams, I mean everyone thought Williams would do really well, but the rain came and they really couldn't show their potential, so Aston Martin capitalised on it. I would consider this a win for them. Speaking of Williams, I don't think Williams deserve a place here, but Albon does. He was very much a very fast car, and what might have been had they actually had a dry qualifying session. The rain came and it kind of spoiled the Williams team, and they ended up in Q1 because they had a very fast car, but they couldn't show it because it was not a very grippy car. When it actually was dry and they had new tyres, Albon was a machine. He had the most overtakes in the race, which was 11 by the way, and we saw him siding through the midfield. Had Albon made it to Q3, I reckon that he would have scored some points here, and it just shows that Williams have got a good team leader. It was just not the weather for them, honestly. Alpine. Well, a podium in the sprint and they managed to get some points in the race. This was a lot better than they could have expected, and it finally gave Gasly something to smile about after his very rocky beginning to Alpine. And the morale has been cauterized almost because it was at its lowest point post-Hungary. And then when we got the sudden dismissal of their main team principal, it got even worse. But then we got the podium in the sprint, and then we got an 8th place. So it managed to stymie somewhat the gap from McLaren to Alpine, but it's still a very big gap to them now. It's really going to be difficult to catch them up at the moment because McLaren, they do have a couple of extra things coming along, and considering their trend, yeah, they're going to be closer to Ferrari than they are to Alpine. This was better than they could have expected, considering they got some very bad news off track. I will give them this. I think they need it. But talk of the papaya devil here, in the meh category, is definitely McLaren. I thought they would have been a shoo-in for potentially a win here. And yes, in the sprint, they were very close to winning the sprint with Oscar Piastri. But ultimately, they just made the bad call in terms of a loaded rear wing. They pretty much thought that it was going to rain all the time here. But what we're starting to see with Formula One these days is that when it rains, they don't want to run. And when they actually did run, the rain dried off very quickly. So therefore we got back into dry conditions and the McLarens were a sitting duck on the straights, as they feared. So they really didn't get to maximize their potential. We got loads of formation laps, and then we just got delays to the start until it was deemed safe enough to run. So yeah, I mean, rain strategies, it's kind of pointless now because you either run on intermediates or you don't run. However, we did get to see Oscar shine in the sprint. He got 2nd place and he's now firmly on the map. He has justified his place there, and we now start to see that McLaren have a really, really good lineup, and it's been justified with the 2nd place. Especially when Lando mucked it up in Q1 and limited his potential to 7th place in the race. But however, again, Lando made those soft tyres run for 27 laps. So there is hope that McLaren will be really kind on its tyres, meaning they have a bit more versatility in their strategies, which will be very crucial if they want to try and get 3rd place in the Constructors. Would they be able to do it? Not really sure, but I think 4th is definitely on. They didn't meet expectations from what we all thought and what I prayed for, but there was still something to cheer about. Hamilton. That was very meh. To be fair, he did get the fastest lap, and I bet it must have felt very good getting it from Max. But then he had that incident with Checo, which was really scruffy. It was just like, oh, you kind of ruined it there, mate. And you got that 5-second penalty. It was just like, oh, you were very close to being a winner here. Had he not had that, I would have put him in the winner category because he did get 4th place on the day. He did get the fastest lap, and those upgrades have justified that Mercedes are definitely the 3rd fastest team at the moment. But other than that, it was just a really bad move and a bit of a desperate one too. So I really had to put him out of the winners because a winner wouldn't do that. And Russell, he was okay, not too much to say. He didn't really do well for qualifying, but he managed to get some points. He had the most overtakes during the sprint, of 3 by the way, and he managed to get a good amount of points in the race considering all the stuff that he had before. So he did a recovery job and not too shabby. Alfa Romeo, again, not too many comments. They were the definition of mediocrity. They got 12th and 13th in the race and it was just like, okay, all right. You didn't suck too hard, but you weren't really in the running for points, honestly. But, you know, it's okay. It's all right. They weren't dead last. They weren't 9th fastest, as they currently are at the moment. And there are talks that Zhou Guanyu has done enough to warrant another season in Formula 1 with Alfa Romeo, or Sauber as it's going to be from 2024. But all of that makes me worry for both Valtteri and Teo Pourchaire. Who's going to be getting that second seat alongside Zhou Guanyu? Is Teo going to have another year in F2 on the sidelines again? Or is this the end of Valtteri in Formula 1? Or could we maybe see Valtteri going back to Williams again? This is a lot of question marks for Valtteri, considering that we all thought he was going to be there for a very long time, or possibly leading the Audi campaign. And absolute talk of the devil again, Carlos Sainz is the first loser I want to talk about. Yes, this is more about his post-race conduct than his actual race conduct, because he did get a good performance in the sprint. He got 5th place ahead of Charles. That's fair enough. And Ferrari were really on it. But he did squander that potential by getting into a little bit of argy-bargy with Hamilton at the start, and thusly, he was compromised, and then Oscar went into the side of him, and it ultimately led to him retiring later on, and Oscar having to call it a lot sooner. So, yes, it was a racing incident, absolutely, and initially, Carlos accepted it that it was indeed a racing incident. It was just bad luck. But then on Twitter, he then sort of went, oh, it was unfortunate, it was a racing incident, but oh, it was Oscar's fault. What? That's not good. What was wrong with just shutting up about it, or just reiterating what you said on the day? Why didn't you just do that? Haas. Not even Nico could offer a glimpse of hope by getting into Q3 in qualifying. He was actually last of the finishers. That is really, really bad, considering we're used to seeing Magnussen doing that. Magnussen did a better job, but overall, Haas to me just feel like they're just coasting at the moment. There's no fight in them. There's no chutzpah. There's no gusto in there. There just really seems to be just a malaise there. They're sort of just accepting that, what more can we do? I mean, let's hope for 2024, like we hope for safety cars all the time and going long. They're still having this problem with tyre degradation. They've not fixed it. And according to many of you in the comments, much more learned than me, they've had this problem for years and they've still not fixed it. They did not use 2021 to fix it for their 2022 car. What? Yes, I know that Dallara makes most of their parts, but they surely would have had enough bods, especially their Ferrari assistants. Now they're going to be the B team for Ferrari, as Alfa Romeo is now coming over to them as well. What? Just do something, Haas! Do something! Sargent. Yeah, definitely a loser. And even Logan admitted it himself that he could have done better this weekend. It wasn't really much to smile about. And now he's going into the summer break with rumours circling around about possible replacements for him. Not Mick Schumacher, actually. There's talks of Alex Palou from IndyCar, and maybe even Nick De Vries comes back in for one last chance. This is silly season after all, so it's bound to be expected. But I think Logan is determined to try and get it right, and it feels like James Vowles is giving him the time of day to try and learn as much as he can. So it's not a case of them just going to abandon Logan right now, but Logan is acknowledging that he has still got a lot to learn, and he hopes to actually get a point, which I think if he just get 1 point, that would be enough. But at least there was something to cheer about, because Logan wasn't last on the day. Hulkenberg took that plum, so yeah, he was able to overtake Hulkenberg at least. Now, Ricciardo is definitely a loser today, and I think it's going to give the pundits a lot to talk about over the summer break. It was decent in Hungary, but here, no. Yes, he did nearly score a point in the sprint, but in the race, Yuki was faster than him by 1/10.5. If you look at the Formula Data Analysis Global Race Pace list, it's categorically clear that Yuki had the measure of Daniel this weekend. It's probably made him realise that he's actually got a fight on his hands with Yuki here in terms of who's going to be running the team, whatever it's going to be called next year, because, oh, well, I'll get to that in a second. What we can talk about right now is that the leadership role is not going to be grasped from Yuki Tsunoda just yet. He has laid down the gauntlet to Daniel by saying, yes, I'm glad that you're here and I can learn some things from you, but I'm not going to be a pushover. I'm going to actually have a fight here. This was my team before you came along, but ultimately, it's not going to matter because Red Bull are going to keep Daniel anyway. And we're all talking about the plans they're going to have, that apparently they're going to be running the RB19 in full for next year. Is that legal? No one's really sure, but they're going to try and do it anyway. I mean, if you listen to Helmut Marko, he's going to do that hell or high water as much as they can, as the rules will allow. And we're just going to have that. And another thing that's really important is that Daniel has already driven the RB19. So if they do get away with it and run the RB19 as the AT05 or the Hugo Boss Bulls Racing HB01 or something or whatever, Daniel's just going to romp away from Yuki. But hopefully, this is going to give Yuki another year in Formula One with Daniel Ricciardo as his teammate. But on the day, Daniel didn't impress. And it's going to get a lot of people talking that, ooh, maybe this Yuki guy's not so bad after all. Or, ooh, Ricciardo didn't really do well. Okay. It's going to cause some rumblings here, but in the long run, Daniel's not going to care. Red Bull's not going to care. But, the internet will care. We'll talk about it. We'll definitely talk about it, that's for sure. Yes, definitely. Justifying Yuki's future.